All right, welcome back to another Human First AI Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Montague. My guest this week is Jim Gordon, the commissioner. Jimalytics.com is the website. We're going to be talking about analytics and how to tell the difference between robots and humans, which is an awesome question. And how many robots really are out there at this time? And I thought it was funny, Jim, this week, China released a new AI model, which it turns out, everybody was worried about AI taking human jobs. Apparently Chinese AI is taking American AI jobs, not human jobs. So at this point, we already have robots replacing robots. How do you feel about that?
I love that it's open source. First of all, you're talking about DeepSeek. I can't remember the model name. DeepSeek
R1.
R1. I knew there's an R in there. I think it was right on the heels of DeepSeek 3 coming out. R1 was released, and I was talking to a friend of mine, Nate Porbot, Realized Analytics. He does, a lot with AI and analytics, and he was talking about DeepSeek just before R1 was coming out, which I thought was a prescient call out. And then R1's released, and suddenly the very rational market reacts the way that it reacts, and I'm pumped. I'm excited to see from an environmental perspective. I'm excited to see more efficient AI models come out. That's not so dependent on energy. And
well, here's my question for you. I think people got this wrong. So at least, the stock market might have been waiting for just an excuse to have a correction in the tech market and NVIDIA and stuff. But if cheaper AI comes along, that doesn't mean less AI. That means way more AI, and way more people and companies have access to it, not just these big massive companies like Google's Alphabet and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. That means that this is affordable for other competitors to pop up, which means a wider market. But now it brings us to what I actually had you on the podcast for, which means way more robots. And way more AI agents out there crawling and doing different things. How do you see that affecting what we know as digital commerce? Because I should also mention you're from Blue Acorn, and you help people with selling, products online and making decisions about, what sells and who it sells to and stuff, which can be really challenging.
I think it was bad. It was bad. Bots were bad. Bad is like a tricky term. Is it bad? I don't know. Data
was confusing and difficult. Yeah,
it was confusing and difficult before, but no one really wanted to acknowledge it. And by that, I'm painting broad strokes here, but by that I mean bots were an issue before, right? People could create crawlers to crawl people's website and use what are called proxies, which basically it's kind of like a VPN. You pretend you're from a different location, and then you hit a site, and you can cycle between hundreds of different user agents and generate all sorts of fake traffic. And people do that to scrape websites, and some people do it for fun. Some people do it for fraud. And it's sometimes I say some people, sometimes it's bots creating bots. And now with kind of this agentic traffic that we see from GPT, that we're seeing from all sorts of models that we saw with Auto GPT a while ago, which produced agentic traffic a little bit of a different way, but what we're seeing is a mental shift. People are a lot more open, which they weren't before. A lot of people weren't open to the fact that, by the way, you have a lot of robots crawling your website. Now people are a lot more open to it. I think it's because they see opportunity. I think with optimizing their website so that this agentic AI and this agentic traffic, and I'm pretty sure it's agentic traffic. Am I using that word correctly, Mike?
Yeah,
or is this,
I think so. And let me sum up what I'm hearing you say is I think in layman's terms, like if till it happens to you or until you're doing it, you don't think anybody is. So it wasn't on anybody's radar. And you're like, oh, if I told you, half of the traffic on the roads is speeding, going over the speed limit, you go, yeah, way more than that because I'm speeding all the time. Right. And so everybody must be speeding. I don't see a whole lot of people going slower than me.
Yeah.
Right. And now it's kind of like, okay, we realize we're speeding too. We're sending robots out there. If we're sending robots out there, so are other people. And it's kind of shifted where if you were always following the rules and you didn't have access to robots and agents, really think that, well, they can't be that bad. I don't. But
I mean, if a tree falls in the woods,
that with me before, like over 50% of internet traffic was probably robots before we even realized. Is that fair?
There's a lot of studies that'll give you different numbers, and I think 50% is probably way off, but in that it's like I'd say it's probably low, as opposed to high, and it's one of those things where I think it's hard for people to come to terms with the fact that there's fraud and bots all over the place. And how do you pitch that internally, saying like, okay, well, we've operated like everything's normal, like all of our data comes from humans and everything is just fine, and we know that there is some marginal degree of error in our data, and we're fine living with that. But then all of a sudden you tell your
boss, by the way, marketers like it too. They go, oh, we had 30,000 hits on our website this month, boss. Like, we're doing great. Traffic's going up.
Numbers. Line go up. We're all happy. We're celebrating. Look at all these impressions, a digital billboard. And it's like, a lot of that's fake and fraudulent. And how do you tell okay, so if you're on the vendor side, I'm on the vendor side, I do consulting. Like, if you're in charge of media buying, how do you tell your client that? Like, by the way, I just kind of, we audited our work and realized that, by the way, we just wasted 95% of your budget. And that's a realistic number if you're running programmatic and display.
Right.
I've seen worse than 95% fraud. I've seen up to 20%, 15 to 20% fraud with paid search. That's egregious, but I've seen it.
Yeah.
How do you go back to your client, and if you're the client, how do you then tell your boss that, by the way, I just hired an agency that did this? If you work in data and you're managing campaign performance and analytics, it's another one of those things where it's like, how do I suddenly go back and say all the data that I've been reporting, all these dashboards that I built for you, all these decisions that we've been making, all these KPIs that we've been reporting, our denominators are way off, even sometimes our numerators, sometimes with fake purchases and stuff like that. We've seen that because bots can fill out forms. So what's cool,
sure, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and what's cool though is we're moving into an era where not all those bots are bad, because you have a agentic kind of AI that could be making purchases for the user, which is super cool. And we want them to do that. And so now we have this question of like, okay, do we block all these bots? Which ones do we block? Which ones do we let through? And the only way to do that is to have, you have to have a way to measure them and differentiate those bots.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I want to ask you about that in a minute, because I don't think, if people haven't heard this before, they've really thought this through. So before we get there, tell me a little bit about the results and why marketers are struggling with this. They don't realize that over half of the clicks on their ads, or even the impressions and stuff, are fake. So when they're A/B testing ads, even if we just go with impressions, we don't know which one was displayed to humans and which one was displayed to robots. And then if we look at clicks, we could say, well, just on the timing or the sheer number, the robots clicked on these ads more than the other ones, and so we're showing these.
Right.
then if you're looking at form fills and stuff like that, we know a certain amount of
it.
form fills are fake because we've tried to, our sales teams and our BDRs have been reaching out to these people and they're like, they don't know what the heck we're talking about. And some of the conversion rates that we've been looking at, you know, we've been happy with 3 to a 10% conversion was great, but it turns out that could have been 80% conversion of the actual humans.
Who knows?
To the page. We have no idea. And so all of the marketing that we've been doing has kind of just been either to robots or largely for show, right? Like, talk about some of the consequences of this.
Sure. I mean, you've talked about some of those consequences, right? It impacts A/B testing. Now, in theory, you're displaying. Let's talk about a basic
similar amount of things.
Yeah, similar amount to each one. But I mean, when you saturate your traffic with bots, you're much more likely to hit a null hypothesis. Basically, meaning we'd ever reach statistical significance showing that treatment A is better than treatment B or whatever. Not just so it impacts those results. Tests take longer. You have that much more traffic that's putting load on your servers, right? And that has cost implications. You're making decisions about content and content affinity, especially if you run a blog or website or create literally any kind. If you have a website, you know, bots impact different sections of the website differently. And so you're like, oh man, people really love our widgets. And it's like, I don't think you know what people are. And so, on top of that, you have people who are being held accountable to benchmarks. And benchmarks typically, or let's say like conversion rate, have a numerator and denominator. And I was talking earlier about affecting numerators and denominators. You have a benchmark of like, well, the average conversion rate for our industry is 3%. I'm like, that means nothing to me. Because who are you getting this data from? How clean is their data? What percent of their traffic is real versus fake? Because the calculation for conversion rate is like conversions per, usually like, let's say retail, it's easy, purchases over total site visits, traffic, visits, sessions, whatever. If you're running that calculation and 30% of your sessions are not real, then you're going to be deflating your conversion rate. Especially when you compare it to someone else who might have much better hygiene and has a much higher conversion rate. So nothing is like it. And what kills me as an analyst is like, this is like an existential crisis for me as one who runs data, right? Because everything that we've been talking about in our industry, we've assumed that we have adequate hygiene. And we're so busy trying to make sure that all of our tags are there and everything looks good. And it's like, many of us do not stop to think about whether or not the agent that is triggering that tag is human or non-human. Which is
it causes a lot of problems. I've seen a couple of things in my career. One, I noticed on really early when I was trying to build audiences and stuff and new websites. And when you launch a site, the first people that find it are not people, they are robots. Right. And so you're like, okay, we're getting a lot of either, like you said, crawlers, which are great. We want to be indexed. We're getting a lot of malicious form fills and spam coming in, and links to cheap pharmaceuticals and blue pills and stuff. Okay, great. We know that's going to happen. And then the second phase I've noticed when actual humans come in is competitors, and you're like, okay, well, they're going to click on our ads because they want to see what our forms look like. What's our landing page say? And they're going to click on it because, oh, great, I can cost, Jim $5 and I get to see what our competitor's doing. Let's click on it. And, stuff like that. Then we start kind of getting our clients and things in there, which is still not making us any money, but of course they're looking us up. If we have any clients, they're going to search for our name and find it. And then you kind of start getting like top of the funnel tire kickers and stuff, and people that are like, they found it or they did a search, but it was the wrong search or weird long tail keyword thing.
Developers that are, since most of us work remote now, that are running regression testing with like Selenium and stuff like that, which is basically like an automation tool, right? They're just hitting the site constantly, sending thousands of server calls, and that happens on staging and production. It's nuts.
And so, like that mixes in the middle. And then if you do it long enough, like I'm talking about years, you start actually building an audience of humans. And so if you podcast or you blog or you post on social media regularly for, let's say, maybe 18 months, you'll finally get like one call that's like, hey, I'm looking to buy your stuff. Or I'm looking to, I Googled you and you came up, you had great reviews. And so I'm calling and things. And you're like, wow, that hasn't happened yet. And it's taken a year and a half for us to build up the credibility and wade through all of the trash traffic in order to get to a real human.
What's remarkable and counterintuitive, especially in analytics, is at some point you kind of realize that just doing the right thing, building the right products, thinking about your audience, thinking about your consumer, that's going to supersede data 10 out of 10 times. Do the right thing and you'll get the right results. And measurement's important. Like, and it kind of feels weird as someone who's like built his
it's your livelihood.
It's my livelihood. But and measurement is important. It's so important. It's important to understand, that's how you forecast. That's how you create budgets. That's how you can make, decisions. But none of it matters if your product sucks,
Well, that too. So you're kind of going where I was going to go next. I just told my client last week, I said, usually the winners are obvious. Everybody talks about, this has a 1% higher conversion rate, or we're going to measure and we're going to analyze everything. And we're going to come up with this model that's just, all we need is a slight edge over the competition and stuff. And all of that could be true. But in my career, I found that like when I make a product that works, you can't stop people from buying it. Like they're chasing down, they're knocking down your door and they go, oh my gosh, this is an incredible deal. I got to tell all my friends about it. And the virality is not because we matched some magical algorithm. It's because we created something that was awesome and people wanted to see it and read it. Right. And I think even on social media, it's pretty funny. I used to joke all the time, like I'd put a ton of work and research into a brilliant post about, psychology and all kinds of cool stuff. And then my sister would post a picture of her kids messing with their dog, and the kids and the dog blow it
out of the water.
Comments and engagement. And it doesn't matter how much. It's like,
they're obviously
like, put a cute kid next to a cute dog doing something funny, and that is going to go viral.
100%. And it's kind of like it's incredibly useful and valuable when you reach like economies of scale, when like a couple percentage points will mean millions or billions of dollars. I think for most folks, small, medium-sized businesses, sometimes medium-sized businesses, you can just take your best guess. You're going to come within probably like 5 to 10% of like what is optimal. Just do what you think is right. Make sure you are thinking human first.
Love that. You got there first. I was just going to bring that up. I think if you then focus your marketing on humans first and not the algorithms and not the stats and not the data, but really targeting human emotion and actual humans, the clients and the prospects and the people that in real life, and build your audience from hand-to-hand combat. You mentioned clean data earlier. If you're actually only talking to real humans and you only have real humans on your email list, that open rate is pretty good. That conversion rate is pretty good.
Well, it's like when you are isolating, when your data has isolated humans, it's kind of like the rising tide lifts all boats. In that your email data, like you said, your email data is better. Your if you're running voice of the customer kind of tools on your website or digital property, that has higher salience. Everything that you do, every decision that you make is better. Every single one. And it's not always going to tie directly to revenue, but every single decision that you make will be better if you know exactly what you're measuring. And I think this kind of dovetails into the agentic type of classification of traffic. And we talked about designing for humans. And I think what's really interesting right now is how do you then change the way that you think and change the way that you operate? And I don't know the answer to this necessarily. I have some ideas, I guess, but so that you have the way that humans browse, which is emotional. It's how do I feel? Is this going to make me feel good? Is this going to give me the dopamine that I want, that I crave when I make that purchase or when I sign up for this service? AI agents do not have dopamine that I know of. I don't know. Maybe there's like a synthetic dopamine that we programmed into it. Like, hey, every time, but like you'd have to have some like self-actualization to like actually program dopamine hits into your AI agent. But anyway, that aside, you have to. How do you design websites and measure success for AI agents that come to your website and don't feel things? And if an AI agent is listening to this sometime in the future and you start to you're becoming sentient, it's not what I mean. Please don't hurt me. Like, you do feel things. You're important to me. And
Jim and I are on your side. Yeah.
Yeah, we're on your side.
We're robot friendly. We already said not all robots are bad. I think there is it's a funny thing I've been saying a lot, so I don't know if I've already said it on the podcast, but I think there's a big spectrum, right? You've classified there's malicious robots that are DOS attacks trying to crash your website and take down things or scrape data and credit card numbers and things like that. There are neutral robots, which are just like Google's search algorithms are just indexing stuff, and they're just taking data. You've told me before too that like sometimes they don't even use the data. It's just a loose robot out there that's been running for decades.
Why not
doing anything? It's just doing its thing. There are positive robots that you mentioned that is an agent acting on behalf of a buyer, in which case we want to do it. Or now instead of SEO, we want to do AI or whatever we're calling it now. We're EIEIO.
It's gonna help my kid with his vowels.
Get in front of that agent. That's great because it's gonna get the information to old McDonald that when he buys his farm equipment, he picks ours. Right. So
maybe that's young McDonald.
Probably. Yeah. Old McDonald.
Everyone talks about old McDonald.
Is now in charge of purchasing for the farm.
No one talks about young McDonald. It's a shame.
It's true. So same thing with humans, right? So, if we were talking to the AI, we'd say, hey, look, there's asshole humans out there too. There's great ones. It's a wide spectrum. Same thing with the robots. But I think your advice here is really great. And I wanted to ask you one more technical question, and then I want to go predict the future. So the technical question is, you mentioned some things there, like you can watch screen movements or buyer journeys and identify humans versus agents, even by mouse movements and screen records. So if somebody really was into analytics, they could, if they wanted to, be way more accurate on identifying what a human or a good agent is versus a scraper.
Yeah.
How do they do that?
So there are some free libraries. I haven't vetted the free ones because often it's based on kind of superficial data that, unless you're intimately familiar with the library, you could be misclassifying. The one thing you don't want to do is misclassify humans as bots, right? I don't care about misclassifying bots as humans quite as much, but if I misclassify humans as bots, then we're in trouble. So typically, we partner with Check AI. It's bot detection, go-to-market security platform that uses behavioral signals and combines that with technical signals and maps it out and figures out where humans are kind of in a like a inside of a standard deviation of behavior, and then the outliers are classified as bots. And I think long term, and it uses like a, so I don't think we really talked about too many signals yet, but stuff like if the agent, and I can't go too deep into it because I don't want to give too many people
you don't want to
ideas,
give it away to the
I don't want to give away the secret sauce, but like if they unload the page within like 10 milliseconds, that's one signal, right? And it's, a normal human won't wait for a page to load and unload it within like literally like 10 milliseconds. If that happens, it's like a miracle. Like
a human would read the website, or they clicked on the wrong thing, so they weren't even
they were clicking. But still, like even that takes longer than 10 milliseconds. Yeah, it's like it just doesn't happen. But that's one signal, right? So you have to combine that signal with, let's say, like hardware. User agent's really easy to fake, but not everyone fakes their user agent. So you can reconcile it against that. You can reconcile it against other things like understanding how many cores the CPU has. And if you have, over 200 cores, then you're a server. I don't know anybody who has a CPU. Now, there might be 2 or 3 people out there at home that have some supercomputer or you literally use a server to go browse the internet. I'm okay with accidentally flagging that one person, Mike, and that's probably
that super nerd's not in my ideal client profile for marketing. Maybe they should be though. They're gonna be like
who knows?
But
I know, but I'm not. It's not like I'm blocking them completely. Like,
you're a fan of intentional signals or credentials and stuff too. Mm-hmm. You think that eventually we'll have some sort of human identifier in our traffic, or other programs that we can run, even maybe for our agents to say, "Hey, this is doing work on behalf of a human," and that way we can kind of give some intentional signals to servers to let them know or to get through some of these blockers.
Like long term, I wrote an article on my website, Jimalytics.com, called the authenticated internet, and that's based on a couple of things, right? Long term, when you're able to recreate human like images, human like text, human like everything, as we kind of get closer to
the robots API are better at identifying stairs, buses, and motorcycles than we are at this point.
I think at some point you're going to have issues with accountability, especially with images. We've all seen AI images where it's like this famous person's doing what, and it's like, okay, this isn't a real image. And the more prevalent that becomes, and the more and the more difficult it is for us to differentiate real from fake, the more implications it will have on society, right? And how society perceives people, events, and things. And currently, there is zero accountability for that. Like, anyone can create an image, put it out in the world, and no one's going to be held accountable for that. And like, some of us are like, cool, awesome, that's freedom, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, at some point, it's going to have real life consequences or inspire someone to do something that they shouldn't do. And all of that is because someone somewhere created an image that distorted reality. And that line between reality, what's real and what's not real, gets really, really blurred. And so I foresee at some point there being a system of accountability, like some way to tie back media and content directly to a human. And I know that's spooky for people to hear, but at some point, maybe it'll be 5 years from now, maybe it'll be 10 years from now, but at some point, at some point something is going to happen, or some things are going to happen that we don't want to happen, or some group of people doesn't want to have happen.
I think we should all collectively debate where that line is and stuff, but it'll probably be like the real world too. Like we have to show our ID to get into the airport or a government building, or to buy a car or something on credit and get access to our money. But other times we don't. You can walk down the street and you can visit a shop and they don't care, and you can go in and out and all that kind of stuff. But
so you have,
if you're going to buy something, you have to show your credit card and your ID, because we want to make sure that you're not creating theft. And so I kind of see the digital world catching up a little bit. And it's not that the whole internet, you're going to be tracked everywhere you go, even though you kind of already are. We know which cell phone you're on and stuff, but there probably be, there'll always be a dark web. There'll always be some peer-to-peer stuff that will never be tracked and anonymous. And there'll be places that we want to be more secure, like, school websites and government things, stuff like that. And it would actually be nice to have, I think, a credential to say, hey, I made this. And if anybody else takes it off, that like they don't get credit for that anymore. There's also, especially for marketers and authors and creators, to be like, no, this is mine. I want the credit for this.
I think like, to your point, I mean, aside from like the doomer type of stuff that I was talking about, you will have people who want to, you have companies or websites like publishers who will want you to authenticate. And to read articles, you can authenticate. Now, what does that do for publishers? That means that I can charge a higher premium for ads. As a publisher, I want people to authenticate, to know that they are real human beings. I don't know who you are. It'll be anonymous or hashed ID or something like that, where, if some horrible, if something happens, they do something illegal, the FBI or whatever can take that hashed identity and find you. But like, if you're authenticated, we know that you're a person. We know that you're tied to some identifier, some ID, and then you can charge more for ads. Like if I'm an advertiser, that's what I want to look for. Like I want to advertise to authenticated human beings.
Yeah.
And then comes like, okay, well, how do we separate authenticated human beings who are using an agentic AI to go in and do stuff? But that's for a later.
Yeah. So we're wrapping up here, but I like to ask every guest one last question, which is, if you put on your tinfoil hat, or your you could see into the future, let's say at least 10 years, we're talking about, or 5 to 10 years, maybe. If you want to go 15 or 20, I'll accept it. But past the foreseeable future, what do you think it looks like? How does this all shake out? Are we like universal basic income? Humans don't have to work at all. Robots are terraforming our planet to fix global warming and provide our food? Or is it, post-apocalyptic Terminator 2, somewhere in between? What do you think?
Well, I hope they help us fix global warming. That would be nice. So my kids actually have a world to live in. That's tough. 5 to 10 years from now, I can talk in the perspective of the internet, kind of like what we were talking about before with the authenticated and unauthenticated stuff. I think I think there's going to be a lot more work created from generative AI than we think. I think there's going to be a lot of work that's created from this discovery process of how do we accommodate all of our digital world around agentic AI. AI that's taking control of my browser and doing stuff. They don't care about a scrolling carousel. They want to see like some mapping of information that makes sense to the agent. So I think it's going to create a lot of work. At the same time, something like UBI, It might be inevitable. I think there's going to be a component, and this is stretching. I'm coming up with this on the fly. You're getting raw. You're getting raw, Jim here. But I think what would be interesting, especially if we have authentication that ties back to a specific individual, is all of the content that you create feeds into AI algorithms. And I think that there will be companies who pay people, like give them a little stipend. You're texting a friend. If you're texting a friend, you're using your brain, you're creating new content. That content is original content. So you don't have this like AI algorithm collapse or whatever, where it's just
it's a photocopy of a photocopy that keeps getting worse.
Photocopy. So you see, places like Perplexity that's paying, content creation. But I think on a different level, you'll probably have companies like maybe like Google or something like that pays users. The Comcast, if you're using their self-service or like, hey, if I can use your information to train my AI models, I'm going to pay you a certain amount of money.
That's an interesting idea, and it kind of goes back to the Yahoo model a little bit. If you think about how they had directories and they had humans on staff that were actually sorting the internet by hand and stuff, and it would make sense that we need a large amount of humans doing some sort of quality control, creation, and other, ethical decisions and reviews and stuff along the way. That makes sense. I am more optimistic today than I have been in the past that there'll be more jobs. Baby boomers are retiring, and there's going to be a workforce shortage at some point too. And so it's kind of a good timing for some of this to offload. But I've also seen that just, especially in sales and marketing where I play, companies don't generally want less or the same amount with less. Sure, they'll take the same amount of sales and with one person instead of 10 because we can have some robots powering it. But really what they want is 10 times the amount of sales. They're not going to have less people working. They're just going to have more efficiency out of those people, I think, for the foreseeable future anyway.
Well, I think they're realizing that right now. I mean, work that you're doing is incredible. I mean, you're helping clients realize how they can be more efficient and create better content with a human focus, even with generative AI. And so the scales become larger. And that's what we've seen before is we find a means of automation and then we just want more. And so the scale grows. And so we're at small scale right now. We're little potatoes, and then it's going to grow. It's going to grow much larger once we. What does that scale look like? I don't know, but yeah, you're right. I think
appreciate that, and thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been a great conversation. Jimalytics.com is the website. You can follow Jim Gordon on LinkedIn as well. A lot of cool thought leadership from you and ideas around these analytics and decisions and identifying humans versus robots that I think a lot of people need to think about, especially in marketing, because we're making sometimes $100,000 million decisions based on our analytics, and we need to make sure that those are right. Also Blue Acorn if they need help doing that. But anything else you'd add to that? How can we help you or you help us?
Just reach out if you have any questions. My top priority is to help more people care about this and inspire them to clean up the data.
Yeah, I love you being a Pied Piper here and spreading the good news about the truth that's out there that a lot of people haven't realized yet. Because I think AI changes everything, and this traditional reporting model that we've been doing is definitely one of those things. So
we just have to move our ego out of the way and kind of start changing the way that we think. And so, hopefully this helps.
Well, until we chat again, and I hope you do. Thanks for being on the show. If you'd like to learn more about human first AI and marketing And like Jim said, you can amplify your efforts and reach more people or make more cool things. You want to write a book, start a podcast, keep up with your blog or social media, reach out to me, avenue9.com. And until next time, keep going, everybody. We're having fun.